Alright, welcome back everyone. Now that I've got the gauge faces refurbished the way I want them, now it's just time to reassemble it and then add the circuit board light to the back for the low fuel light, and then polish up the clear cover because it's got some good sized scratches in it. So let's get started. I'm going to take my high beam and turn signal indicator, make sure that's in there, and then we're going to start with the tachometer. You got this Prindle cover for the rally gauges, so make sure that you angle this circuit board behind that so when it goes in you're not hanging up on that. Get these down, it's push tabs. Good. That is down nice and tight. Now we're going to go over to the oil volts and the fuel temp. These have tabs on the side that line up with these grooves and these studs. So when these go in, you want to make sure that you have it lined up right so that it fits down into these grooves. There we go. So these grooves are going to keep it held in place. It's going to help center the bolt that's going to hold both sides. Oh, good. It's down in place. Last is the speedo. If you notice what I did, decided to modify it a little bit. I didn't show you that, but I decided to put the Hutchinson High Performance, the HHP logo, onto it right above the mile per hour, just to kind of give it a little bit of customization to me. So that is now down in place. Now it's a matter of taking our 1/4 inch nut driver and sinking these screws down. I'm going to put them all in loose until I make sure I have everything in where I want it. And remember, this is 25-year-old plastic. We don't need to go crazy. We just need to get down in there so they're held in place. And then we'll snug them down so we don't crack anything. Okay, now just get these tightened down. Not too tight, like I said. They just need to be snug enough. They're pretty tight in this plastic. Snug enough that they're not going to go anywhere. Last is the indicator box. All the indicator lights on the front. Goes down into place. Just make sure that plastic is in. And then we fit the cover down over top of everything. There's 2 pins over here. I'm going to make sure those line up. Okay, so except for the cover itself that goes over this, we're all back together. I think that looks pretty cool. I like it. Anyway, looks a lot better than it did before I started, and I like the fact that I got a little customization to it without going over the top. So when you look at it, you're like, oh, it's a stock speedo, and then you look a little closer. Oh no, wait, no, that's not. Oh, look at the tack, you know. So anyway, that's kind of neat. Give me a second, I'm going to grab the cover. I'll show you what I got to do to that to get it cleaned up. Okay, so now the clear cover. And I tried using the McGuire's Plastex and hand buffing this, and I don't think there's any way that I'm going to be able to show it to you just through the camera. But there's a couple of scratches in here that you can pick up with the fingernail. So they're deeper than something. I kind of take it like you do aluminum, where if your thumbnail can catch a scratch or a groove, more than likely it means you're going to have to sand that area to kind of get it down to something that you can buff out. It's just not going to buff by itself. And I'm finding the same thing with this. It's got a couple of grooves in it that no matter how much I sit and polish it, it just won't come out. And I'm just not happy with it. It's it's got a bunch of small hairline scratches like that in it. So I was out at AutoZone and I'm looking around. I'm like, what can I find for this? And I found this 3M headlight restoration kit. And the reason I got it is because it comes with a drill activated sanding system. So what's great about this, I'll set this off to the side, you get the attachment that has a Velcro on the one end that you put in the drill, and it comes with multiple sanding discs. You got a bunch of these 500 grit sanding discs, and then the next one up you have 800 grit, which is a lot smoother, and then you have this Trizac 3000 grit buffing wheel, which is the last stage before you get to the foam compounding wheel, and you actually start buffing some clear back into the lens. The old lens that came off, I tried it on that first because I figured, you know, if I'm going to ruin it, let me ruin the one that I'm not going to be using. And put tape down the center and did the system on one side with a little modification, and wow, it came out pretty good. Got out all the fine scratches and some of the deep ones I could feel. Really did a good job. So I'm doing the same thing to this. I'm going to do the whole thing. And what I ended up doing was I tried to go as little as possible on the aggressiveness. So I skipped the 500 altogether and went straight to the 800 grit, and that seemed to work perfect. And instead of using the drill, I actually did this by hand. And then I went to get the tape, because this is a headlight kit, so they give you tape to put around the headlight itself so you don't mess up the finish. And then they comes with a rubbing compound and then a synthetic wax protectant. Don't know if I want to use either of those, because I found that the plastics on the last stage on the compound thing actually worked pretty well. So I'm probably going to end up sticking with that and not having to cut that open, and maybe I'll save that for actually doing something with the headlights later on. So and when I did this, I was like, oh man, I'm ruining this thing. And ended up not being. It's just plastic. Even though it's clear, I mean, it's just like anything else. You sand out imperfections and then buff it back to where you want it. So what I did was I just used straight line sanding on this and went all the way through. And this actually works quite well. And I'll just get down here and attack these scratches. And what I'll do is I'll wipe this down, and I'll keep going at this until I know that I have actually sanded through any of these scratch areas. Plus, by wiping this down, it's going to give you an idea of the spots you hit and the spots you missed, because you're looking for this thing, once you're done this sanding technique, to be completely cloudy. It's going to be almost opaque to where you're not going to be able to see anything through it. But the point is to get it down to a nice, smooth, even sanded finish, and then from there you buff it back to where you want. So I'm going to wipe this down and I'm going to check it, and then once I'm done with this, you can see, I mean, it's pretty hazy at this point. I'm going to wipe it down, check for any hairline scratches or anything, and then once I'm positive that I've got this sanded down nice and smooth, I'll come back and then we'll go to step 2 of how I do it, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, I got this thing sanded pretty good, all except for one pesky small little line where the groove is just so deep that I was afraid if I sanded on it too long, I was going to thin out one area and have it look like a distorted look through the lens. So it's so small, I mean, you're not going to be able to see it. So I'm pretty happy with that. 800 grit is done. Now we move on to what I like to call the magic, which is this 3000 grit Trizac pad. And this thing, it's almost like, it has the texture of like a sponge almost. It's that non-aggressive. It's very light. So My voice is probably going to get drowned out once I turn this drill on. I have it set on the low speed because you don't want a lot of speed on this because you don't want to burn the plastic. And you want to make sure with this, the directions say that it has to be wet. Spray down the area you're going to sand, spray down the pad, make sure that's wet. And then what you do is you sand in a back and forth motion until you see what they call a white slurry. And once you start to see that, you know that it's actually starting to polish away some of these fine scratches and start to clean up the viewing field. And then once you start to see that slurry, you're going to do 3 to 4 more passes, probably going to do 5, and then wipe, and then I'm going to look at it. I may end up doing it twice, but that's the basic procedure. So I'm going to spray this down, and then I'm going to shut up and just do some sanding. And then once I've done this, we'll see how this turned out. Okay, that was about 3 to 4 passes, thereabouts. And what that's going to do, and it's not going to look perfect, this is basically turning all those 800 grit scratches into fine 3000 grit scratches. Yeah, already I can see and it's really starting to clear up nice. Yeah, a little bit better. It's getting there. What I'm going to do is wet this down. I'm going to make one more pass. You've already seen how that is, so I'm going to go ahead and do another couple of passes, do another couple of wet buffs across this thing. And then once I'm done with that, then we'll move on to the polishing compound with the buffing wheel. Get it down to a point where it's really, really close, and then we'll hand polish out the last little bit of it. So let me get that done. Okay, this is really starting to take shape. So now we're going to move on to the last machining procedure. And like I said, instead of using the rubbing compound that came with the kit, I'm going to save that, and I think what I'm going to use is the this Meguiar's Plastex. And I think that's going to do just fine. If not, I can always crack that open and give it a couple of grinds with the compound and then go to the Plastex polish. But I think this will work out fine. It did for the test one. It seemed to work well, so I'm not going to change it up. So what I like to do on the compound pad, I usually give it a quick spritz. Make sure that the surface area is kind of moist, just a little bit. Kind of aids in the polishing process. And then we're going to use, like they call in the industry, about a dime-sized dollop of product. Oh, fancy product. Anyway, so we put that down, and then to avoid splatter, what we do is put this down, and I'm going to spread this out over the area here. And then now I'm going to get the polish in this, and it might take a little bit to do this, a bunch of passes, a bunch of different polish passes on this, but eventually it's going to get to the point where it's going to look way better than it did before. So start off with this one, do a couple passes. And that's a general idea. the one thing you want to do is you want to make sure that at no time do you actually run this dry. You want to keep the wax. You want to let the wax do the work. You run this thing dry, all you're going to do is just end up buffing more scratches back into the plastic you're trying to buff out. So it's going to take, I think, it looks, just by looking at it, it looks better already. But I'm going to, I think I'm going to do a bunch of multi-passes on this and a bunch of wipe downs in between to kind of check my progress. Once I get done with that, I'll come back and then we'll do the hand polish and then should be done. Okay, so I'm done with all the machine polishing. What I did was about 5 applications. I'd put about a dime size dollop on the pad, rub it in, polish that out multiple times. Stop, wipe it down, put it up against the light, check it, another dollop, back again, did that about 5 times. And I'm telling you, even with, I'm going to go ahead and hand polish it to see if it gets any better, but holy cow, that, this is better than I thought it would be. And it's, I wish the camera could catch just how scratched up and crappy this thing was. I found it in the junkyard, and it was actually laying on the floor. The whole Speedo cluster was laying on the floor of the cutlass that I found it in, and all I wanted was the cover. So I had a nut driver with me, so I just took the cover off because I didn't want any of the guts or anything underneath, because it was a regular grandma swing dial Speedo. So I got the cover and just paid for that. But man, it must have been rattling around inside that car and got thrown here and there, people poking through it, because it was pretty scratched up. And I was kind of depressed. I was like, well, you know, either I'm going to have to find another one, or this is just going to have to go in kind of boogered up, and I'm just going to have to live with it. And man, what a difference. Holy cow. That looks new. I mean, you have to hold it up to the light, and you can still see some very minor swirl marks from the compounding. And I'm hoping that once I do some hand buffing on this, that kind of goes away too. Even if it doesn't, man, you take just a little ways back from it, and it looks like a piece of glass. I mean, it's beautiful. So very pleased with how that came out. If anyone is thinking of restoring one of these or some other type of clear plastic in their car, I'm not getting paid for this, obviously, but man, this 3M system, the headlight system that uses the drill sanding, man, this thing is really good. I can only imagine what it does on your headlights, but this worked out perfect. Of course, I modified it a little bit to fit what I wanted. I didn't need to go 500 grit. I didn't think the marks were that deep, and this plastic, quite frankly, is a little bit thinner than what you'd have on a headlight. Obviously, that's going to take more abuse than this is. So this is a little bit thinner. So I just did the 800, 3000, machine buff it a bunch of times with the Plastex, and this came out perfect. Unbelievable. Anyway, so now I'm going to hand buff it, and this is just a buff pad, and I've went ahead and spritzed it down a little bit just to get it a little bit damp, just so it moves across here a little easier, and it doesn't drag or any dry part of it cause any scratches or anything that I'm trying to get rid of. Put a little dollop on here, and then just start rubbing this in. I think I'm going to go with nice long even strokes. If you're doing this, wow, this is, I don't know, it's epic. This is huge. I cannot believe how well this turned out. This surpassed my expectations. I thought, well, let me try it on the test piece. And I did it on the test piece, but not like full bore like I did this one. I was more worried about, am I going to sand the plastic and then it's going to end up distorting it or making it hazy, and I can't buff it back just because it's the type of plastic that it is. So that was the test. And man, after really getting after it and putting a little bit of elbow grease in it, this thing has come out phenomenal. I'm not even sure if I want to put it on the car now. It's so nice. Anyway, here I am going on about a piece of clear plastic. Anyway, let me get all the tape off of this. I think I'm going to buff it one more time. Just give it a good hand buff. I might even buff the backside just to kind of give it that little extra bit of clear. And then it's back on to assembling the rest of the Speedo, and then we're almost done with the cluster. So let me finish this up, and then we'll bolt everything together. Okay, our newly buffed clear lens we can now install. Fit that down right into place, and then 1/4-inch nut driver, 4 screws, I'm sorry, on the outside here. And then except for the addition of the low fuel light in the back, this is all buttoned up and done. It can go on the shelf and await going back home in the car. I think I'm going to end up using painter's tape or something. I'm just going to tape over the clear lens. That way I don't mess up all the great work I just did to get this thing nice and smooth and clear. Tighten up this last screw. Remember, this is 25-year-old plastic, and we don't want to mess that up. Alright, I've got microfiber here that I can lay this down on so we can look at the back. Okay, so here is our light and its little circuit board that it's on. Now, there in the instructions it said that if you look at the front, you'll see there's a pin at the 12 o'clock, one at 6, and then one at 9. The 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock you have to run to the ground and to the sending unit on the back of here, and then it has its own 12 volt through the circuit through the circuit thing here. So that's all taken care of, so you just need to take care of those two. So I identified the 2 pins on the back and soldered my wires in, and I have them situated in exactly where I need to run them, because you need to put it to this ground screw and to the sending unit, which is over here. And you need a 5/16 nut driver for that, and this bulb just snaps or screws in just like any other typical bulb. So you're going to get this snapped into place. That is good. And then I run my wires to where I need them. So let's go ahead and get the ground off. The nuts in there. So the ground will go into place. Then we'll screw that back down, and then we're doing the same thing to the other side. Let me make sure this goes on straight. There we go. Center that up. Again, this stuff is old. Let's try not hand cranking it down too hard. Last thing you want to do is get this far in the project and break or crack something. So then we got the sending unit. We'll get that lined up. And then while I'm at it, I'm going to check the rest of these. Make sure they're tight. They're snug down. Okay, the only thing left to do now is make sure that I've got what I want to do as far as doing LEDs on this. So I'm That can come at a later date. So for right now, I think I'm just going to take painter's tape, whoosh, cover this thing over so it's going to be safe, and then I'll just have to wait until the rest of the car is done and put it back in. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed this. It was fun for me, and man, I really do think that turned out gorgeous. It looks brand new. I am, and with the Oldsmobile logo in there and the HHP logo, I really dig that. No more stupid stick out here to let dust get through the hole and back into the gauges. So one more project done, and let's see. What did Jesse James say? Now all I have left to do is everything. All right, well, until you see me next time, take it easy.